Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday.
How are you doing today?
I'm good, just coming off of the Thanksgiving holiday.
Ooh.
And by Thanksgiving, I mean a holiday that celebrates genocide.
Yeah, we're so grateful for it.
Yeah, awkward.
We practice thankfulness on a holiday that celebrates genocide.
Yeah, I had a client say that to me recently, and I was like, that is true.
That's actually very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. So today's topic, and if this is posted at a later time, like sometime mid-January or February.
Yeah, whenever I cut this thing.
It's mainly because we just take our time doing these episodes whenever we want.
Mm-hmm.
But I actually wanted to talk about gratitude. Because it's a perfect time to talk about gratitude.
Yeah, of course.
So, what is gratitude?
So gratitude, I would say it's a practice. Like if we think about it, just the definition of being like thankful or identifying the things in life that we are thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
But if they think about it as a daily practice of recognizing the things in our lives that we actually have a lot of appreciation for, and being able to have that mindfulness of these things rather than just letting them pass us by or being unmindful of these things as they show up in our lives, of really taking the time to see what are the things in our lives that we have appreciation for.
Yeah. So in the world of therapy and kind of in the world fully, there's this big concept of being grateful and learning to practice gratitude. A lot of homework assignments about like gratitude journals and acknowledging things that we're grateful for. Why?
So it's actually, there's a lot of research on this about gratitude and how it changes the way that we see the world. And it takes us from being in a position of like really kind of seeing the world and seeing ourselves in this deficit model and being able to identify the other things in our life that kind of help to balance things out.
Mm-hmm.
And so as we shift our perspective, we start to see things differently. Instead of it just being, I'm, sitting here drinking some like shitty coffee, if I'm actually being mindful of the things that I have appreciation for, I'm appreciative that I'm waking up and that I can drink coffee.
Yeah.
And I can do these things. And we start to kind of shift our mindset. And so people become really into it because it starts to shift your perspective on the world.
Yeah. So the other thing to add to that, it really does help the practice of mindfulness.
Yes.
And it truly does help you come into the present moment, because it's kind of like the other day I was driving on Santa Monica Boulevard because my office is in Westwood and my home is in Hollywood. So I have to go through Beverly Hills and West Hollywood to get to Hollywood. And so I'm sitting in traffic, and that took me literally, I want to say 35 minutes to just get through Beverly Hills.
35 minutes?
35 minutes. So if I'm sitting in that moment in the car, and it's winter time, so daylight savings, it gets dark at 5 o'clock, and a lot of people are not happy. So like there's a lot of these like triggering annoyances that are happening constantly.
Yes.
Which then lead me to my triggering annoyance of like economy and the housing and how like finances, and then my life and all the things that could be going wrong and are going wrong. And so in that moment I had to kind of bring myself back and say, okay, let's come back. Let's not kind of go into all those places. In the here and now, what are the facts of the situation of my life? And to be able to identify all of them and to get grounded and kind of say, I'm actually grateful that I can be sitting in my car, that I have a roof over my head to drive to, that I have an office that I can work from, because during the pandemic that drove me crazy, like not having a space to drive to. I was not one of the people that enjoyed staying in the same place that I sleep and work. Like I don't like that.
Yeah.
And all the other things of like, okay, I can't necessarily buy the house that I want because it's $2.6 million. in Los Angeles, California, and it's only a 3-bedroom house that doesn't even have a pool and a lot of other things that you'd expect a $2.6 million house to have.
Yeah.
But you know what? I'm grateful that I actually still can live in LA because LA is a beautiful city to live in comparison to other states and other cities. To be able to come in the present moment and actually acknowledge the two truths, right? The negative things that exist alongside a positive, and to actually acknowledge I'm still living happily.
Yeah.
And mainly happily because I can practice gratitude for the way I'm living and what my life looks like right now.
Yeah. And how did it shift that experience in the car? What were you noticing, even within yourself, when you were first realizing I'm stuck in this traffic, I've been here for 30 minutes?
Oof. I love that you asked that because it really is an internal experience. As I'm sitting there, it's like my back gets tight, like all the images, like it's like life gets dimmer. Like life gets dimmer, my facial expressions start getting tighter. Like I feel this sense of like unhappiness. My frown starts going down a lot more. I start feeling things are unfair. I start having these unfair thoughts, and then I start getting hopeless because I'm like, well, how am I supposed to achieve all of these things? And so it feels like it's unreachable, untangible. All of like it feels very, very dark. And it just feels like it's getting pulled in. So the second I was able to like use the stop skill and say stop, take that deep breath. It's like like the best way to describe it is like I got my head above water.
Yeah.
So I got my head above water and I was like, okay, I'm looking at the ocean. It's actually kind of beautiful. It's shimmery. The sun is out. The clouds are there too. It's pretty cold. And these little seaweeds are eating me, but you know what? Like, you know what? Okay, we can start swimming back to shore and slowly enjoying the water and enjoying the process and enjoying the ride, which then ended up being such a beautiful ride out. Yeah. And then I ended up home and got to play with my dog and everything was great. But it really does feel like drowning versus coming out and then seeing the shimmery ocean.
Yeah. Because the way that you're like, you're not able to really breathe, get a breath in when you're in that tension. And it's interesting, is like becoming awake to the world. Yeah. That's how it feels. Like you're actually shifting from a position of I can't see anything, I feel overwhelmed, I'm like, you know, I have no room left.
Yeah.
And so being able to start to see the world again through a different lens. And it's one of those things that I definitely saw. I don't know if anyone's had like kind of just insane bad luck with travel.
I'm one of those.
So I had, a few years ago, I was on a trip with my sisters and I was like, I don't want this trip to end. I'm having a really good time. We get to the airport, our flight's delayed. There's not really a clear reason why.
You manifested it.
I did.
Yes.
Our flight's delayed. I'm just sitting there, and it's one of those situations where you're like, this is kind of feeling like it's not going to happen. And then the flight attendants come on speaker. We're on the plane. We boarded, and they're like, by the way, we timed out, so we have to like cancel this flight. And I was like, what? Like, are you kidding? So I'm on the plane with both of my sisters and we get off the plane and we're trying to like get back to like our respective lives on the other side of the country. And there's no way back. Yeah. We actually just can't. There are no flights, there's no room. I guess other flights have been delayed for other reasons. So there's no way out. And I'm in the airport. I've been in the airport at this point for like 10 hours. My sisters, one of my sisters has like small children. She's like trying to get home to her kids. My other sister's in school, and then there's me. And I just
excited.
Like, and I'm like, I should probably get home soon. And I ended up stuck in Arizona by myself for 2 days. And I just had this moment of, it was such just so many wrong things happened.
Yeah.
One of my sisters had to fly through Philadelphia to get back to New York.
Oh my god.
Another one flew through Boston and Florida randomly. It was a weird day. So we had all kind of taken these kind of crazy journeys to get back, and I'm sitting at a hotel in Phoenix having an acai bowl, and I was like, what a bunch of like random bullshit today. And being able to take a step back and be like, it didn't really, the intensity went down so much, but I was like, it all worked out. Nothing bad happened. Yeah, we wasted some time, but we were together. And I think now it's something that we laugh about.
Yeah.
And I'm always thinking about like being able, sitting in that room, I had ordered like this acai bowl to this random, probably not, I wouldn't say it was like a Ritz-Carlton. I would say it was not that nice of a hotel. I have no idea how I even got there. I have no memory of this, but at the end of the day, when I was able to take a step back and just be grateful for the time that I had and being able to kind of shift my perspective on the situation of like, okay, so I got an extra day of vacation.
Yeah.
And being able to change that thought helped me to not make this whole thing about, you know, the bad part, about the negative part.
Yeah. And I think this is the thing where it's I was actually talking to one of my clients who is an artist, and we were talking about art in our session and how the concept of art and painting and different forms of art, it comes from emotional experiences, and most people tend to think the emotional experience has to be a negative one, right? Like to be an artist, you have to be negative and pessimistic, and the world has to be this way, and so in order to create beautiful art, it has to be painful. And it's funny because we've been working a lot on non-judgmental stance and practicing changing perceptions and a lot of positive kind of psychology and gratitude-based work. And he literally was just like, it's so interesting, the art that I'm doing now, it's such a mindful art that's gotten so much attraction.
Yeah.
Because he's like, under it, I'm expressing my frustrations about things. I'm allowing myself to experience and observing the emotion, expressing my frustrations, expressing all the negative things that I have to release, and then I'm covering it with my gratitude of all the things that I do have. So two truths are existing in the same art form, and it's not ending with this doomsday perspective, but it's ending with these bright colors and amazing, and everyone is validating him and just putting like every piece that he's showing to everybody is everyone's having such a positive reaction to it. So he actually brought it up in like, why don't we have so much more positive psychology in the world? Why do people like to go towards the negative and being pessimistic? And it's actually true, because when you give gratitude assignments or anything of like change the perspective, and it's not about becoming optimistic and only everything is good. That's not the point of gratitude or learning to have like a positive perspective in life and being mindful in the present moment. That's not what it's about, excuse me. It's actually about learning to allow two truths to exist. And accepting the negative and yet believing and knowing that good things come too.
Yes.
Not only good things exist, but like if you're going through an emotional pain due to grief or loss or anxiety or sadness or shame or guilt, and it's this immense that you like can't get rid of, like especially grief. It's knowing that the grief is here, and it's you sit with it. You don't try to change it. You don't try to do anything with it. But you also know this too shall pass.
Right.
This too shall pass, and the future will declare itself. Those are like my favorite sayings of this too shall pass. Something really good is happening. Guess what? This too shall pass. Something horrifying is happening. This too shall pass. And something good is always around the corner. Something negative is always around the corner. Those two truths exist. So it's acknowledging life actually is going to be okay no matter what.
And when you're talking about that, it's so interesting because it's reminding me not only of dialectics, of being able to see both things at the same time, it's reminding me of this idea of making meaning.
Yeah.
And thinking about it through the lens of like bad things that have happened in our lives. And when I think about it, like kind of bridging those two ideas, we don't have to try to make meaning out of everything. But as you're talking about it, I'm hearing like when you're talking about your client's art of these negative, like putting to paint, putting to art, these experiences is actually making something else.
Yeah.
It's giving people joy. And I think that's such an interesting idea of like, as we start to think about making meaning out of those experiences, it can be something tangible, it can be art, and it can also be just figuring out what does it mean that this happened. And obviously there are some times and that it's too soon to feel gratitude for something like that, or too soon to make meaning. Eventually, I think that as we're like kind of looking back upon things, we can kind of look at it through a different lens.
Yeah. That's kind of one of the I'm a big DBT, dialectical behavioral fan. And I think I'm such a big DBT fan because it really does bring in like one of the skills is making meaning out of things. And every single time I teach the skill and I talk about the skill, it's describing it and it's funny because you said it like sometimes it might be too soon, and there are some clients where they're like, if it's too soon, what do you do? And I'm always like, too soon's a judgment. It's painful. When you're in that painful experience, you want to validate that painful experience. You don't want to find the other truth in that painful experience. So it kind of is like we're not willing to find the meaning in it. And sometimes the meaning doesn't have to be this like big grand thing of like something amazing is going to happen. Sometimes the meaning is just this too shall pass, and this is part of life. And it is what it is, and it's not, it just is. It's a part, like death. One of the things, like when my grandmother is a very important person to me. My mom's mother, who I love and adore. I have so many phenomenal memories with both my grandparents, but my grandmother passed during the pandemic. It was a very, very painful loss for me. I think I've had a couple of painful losses, my grandfather included in it, but my grandmother was one of the ones where it hit me in such a different way. And to still be able to practice gratitude the day of finding out of her loss. And then like 2 weeks later, someone else that was very important to me, that was much younger, that died due to COVID, passed. And again, I was just like, all right, we're still gonna practice gratitude. Like I'm not going into the unfairness of this. I'm not going into finding the negative meaning of like the why did this have to happen to this poor person so young? It wasn't the time, it wasn't this. Why not just go into like, you know what? It is what it is, and I'm grateful that they were a part of my life. And that's about all I can say while I sit with the sadness that I lost them, with the pain of missing them and knowing that I'm not going to be able to see them, and that missing feeling. So I'm able to hold the painful emotions while still be able to remind myself I'm still grateful. Like I'm not saying I'm grateful they died. I'm saying I'm grateful they were part of my life, and with their death I'm sitting with my chest being so tight I can't even breathe because I know I'm gonna miss them. And I know I'm not gonna see them again, and this is just this is surreal and unreal. And then but I'm also grateful. I'm grateful for all my experiences with them, all my memories with them. I'm grateful for every picture I have with them. And so now every year on their anniversaries, I actually just look at their pictures and I talk to them about how grateful I am and how happy there's still a memory in my life and one that I feel. And it really does make a big difference.
Yeah, of course. I think especially in the grieving process, I think the way we position ourselves, I think is so much of that. I think it can kind of go into those thoughts, that bargaining or the general like fairness fallacy around it, and being able to take a step back and having gratitude for the person, that the relationship that you had. It's such a different way of approaching it. And it's one that I think it's hard to access at times. And I always say, like, I think that what's so powerful is that it came from within.
Yeah.
And I think what's important that I like to think about with this is that we can't command someone else to start to feel grateful, gratitude, feel like to make meaning.
Yeah.
It has to be that internal experience, because oftentimes I think that these ideas, concepts can be weaponized. And when it's a decision that we're making, there's so much more power to it. When we can be empowered to feel multiple things at the same time for somebody who's so important in our lives, and making sure that it's not like, well, you should be grateful for what you have.
Yeah.
Because that's never made someone feel more grateful.
No, not at all. It never does. And it kind of gives, my middle finger automatically wants to pop up and be like, why don't you be grateful for this? But I think that's the thing. It's the intentional act.
Mm-hmm.
It's the intentionally within yourself, and it's not an easy thing.
No.
One of the things that I always tell my clients, I'm like, it's not easy to intentionally decide that you want to practice gratitude.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just, let me say I'm grateful and then I'm going to suddenly feel this immense gratitude.
Totally.
It's that you have to intentionally keep doing it and trying different verbiages and trying different ways, and not giving in to saying, throwing myself into this experience that's actually coming up is just easier, and let my brain and my body do their own thing without me trying to navigate having two truths in it. Because part of mental health and part of psychology is not letting your brain and body take control. It's allowing your brain and body to have the natural scientific experiences that they do have, while you intentionally trying to cope with it by doing something that's positive for you.
Yeah.
To me, that is the concept of positive psychology and overall gratitude. That's what it does. It's intentionally bringing yourself to feeling grateful when everything else is on the negative.
Yeah. And I think it's such an interesting, it really kind of pivots us in the direction that we can go. Of like, there's a way that something bad happening, and there's a way that we can process it, and it can completely throw us off track, versus being able to acknowledge, process this thing happen, and keep going.
Yeah.
And I always think about, like, how do I want to react in situations? And I feel like this is something that's come up for me more the more, like, being around children, because I'm like, I don't want to, like, teach my niece, for example, that in response to stress, like, I sit down and, like, refuse to get up for 3 days. Like, I don't think that's, like, the most helpful, like, lesson.
No, you don't think so? You don't think humanity will survive if their generation just sits down for 3 days every time they're stressed?
Yeah, I guess not as much. And so when I think about the different kind of things that I want to teach and how I want to be in the world, this is how I want to be. I want to be somebody who is able to make meaning, and even in small things. I always think about, there's this thing that I did when I was 17. My younger sister I was picking her up from tennis, and she's limping on her way to the car. And I'm 17, I'm a bit of an asshole, and I'm like, Sarah, stop being dramatic. You're fine.
Poor Sarah.
I know. And at the time, her like ankles like swelling up, her foot was broken.
Oh, poor Sarah.
And she was like, no, Lauren, it really hurts. And I was like, and I'm, and I think back to this after I obviously found out this is that she had broken her foot. I felt pretty bad.
You don't say.
And I think about this, and even the way I make meaning out of that, where I'm like, I learned something very valuable, which is that you don't know everything. And I like made an inner commitment, and sometimes the way that I process things is I learned that I can definitely be wrong. And the way that like my living amends is like, I'm not going to do that again, and I'm going to use this as a moment to realize and being able to kind of shift the way I see it, instead of it being this shameful thing that I hope never comes out, or anyone ever finds out about it, being able to own and honor that, like, I did something that I'm not proud of, and I can do something different with it, and have gratitude, not for like deeply invalidating and potentially causing harm to my sister.
Poor girl's foot was
Yeah.
broken.
Actually broken. I could have brought the car a touch closer. Instead of that, I can say, I'm going to take this experience, I'm going to do something different with it. I'm going to make that meaning, have gratitude that I could learn from something like this. And so it doesn't have to be like, I'm grateful that I was once a huge asshole. I can understand and figure out what I want to learn from this for moving forward.
I love that you said that, because that is actually one of the techniques that I teach all the time. And like, sometimes finding meaning is literally just learning the lesson.
Yeah.
And it's okay. It's okay.
Totally.
Like, it's okay to feel ashamed and say, then that's that. I'm grateful for this lesson.
Yeah.
And that's one of the most beautiful ways of becoming a better version of yourself.
Absolutely.
Not for the sake of anybody else. And again, this what I always tell clients is, you're not doing this to seek validation from the world that you're a good person. You're not doing any of these intentional changes internally in learning to like have two truths, and learning to practice mindfulness, and learning to practice non-judgmental stance, and learning to find meaning and have willingness and be grateful and do all these things for the sake of anyone noticing that you're a good person. You're learning to do this so you can appreciate yourself as a human being more and more. And that is one of the most important things about therapy to me, is not about doing it for the sake of pleasing anybody.
Yeah.
And or like changing habits, not only therapy, but changing habits and doing things. It's about learning to appreciate yourself as a healthier, happier human being, because you've intentionally made small shifts in how you think, how you allow yourself to experience your emotions, how you react, and how you can actually be grateful for what life you have and what life you've created, and what life you are living.
And I think that's such a important thing to remember, of like, who is this for? Because I'm never going to buy into something if I'm just doing it for somebody else. It really has to come back down to, how do I want to be in the world?
And what am I grateful for? Not what other people think I should be grateful for.
Yes, exactly. Well, with that,
I'm grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you setting up the fucking video camera every week while I watch and eat.
I got you. I'm grateful for you figuring out all this stuff and posting it. And everybody, we are also grateful for you for watching, following, and commenting. We'll see you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.